Hello. It's been a while since I've talked to you like this, hasn't it? And I gotta say, I'm extremely excited to talk about this show. I've spoken very little about anime on this channel before, but all of that changes today. Alright, let's get started. I rewatched Madoka Magica, and dear God, this show is wild. So for a bit of context, I first saw this show over 3 years ago, which probably doesn't sound like that long ago, but that was the first year I first started watching anime, and to be honest, saying all this aloud makes me realize that I haven't been watching anime for really that long at all. But to get to the point, this was the third anime that I ever finished. Yep, third. After everybody's first shows of Attack on Titan and Death Note, I made a beeline straight for Madoka Magica of all shows. Why? Because, to be totally honest, I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't really have a watch list at the time, so I just kind of watched whatever my friends recommended to me first. Long story short, someone said this was one of their favorites, so I watched it. So, why does this matter? Well, it means that I watched this show long before I had any sort of idea what to expect from an anime. Now, that's kind of a big deal when considering the show in question, given that Madoka Magica's entire purpose can be interpreted as a commentary on stereotypical anime tropes and genres. Everything about this show is so unique, and I'm going to be saying that a lot throughout this video, so be prepared. Okay, so obviously this video contains spoilers for both the show and the Rebellion movie. The purpose of this video is to take you through what it was like for me to re-experience this show again, knowing everything I know now. If you haven't seen this show and you're even the slightest bit interested, go watch it. Don't spoil yourself on all of the great twists by watching my dumbass fangirl over all of them. Oh yeah, expect a lot of fangirling, by the way, because I absolutely adore this show. Okay, so I don't really have a planned order for what to talk about, so I'm just going to go down the list. So first off, this show moves insanely fast, and I realize that it's only a 12 episode show, but it moves hella fast for a short anime as well. By the end of episode 3, the mentor character has already been killed off, rest in peace second best girl. In the 4 or 5 episodes that follow, Saika decides to become a magical girl due to the need to simp, has a rivalry with third best girl, learns that her soul is now forever trapped inside an egg, gets full on cucked by this bitch, becomes mentally unstable, and after all of that, she transforms into a living embodiment of depression. This all happens by episode 8, and I'm all for that. Too often do you come across anime that take their sweet time for like 18 episodes, and then they proceed to zoom past all the actually interesting stuff. Hell, we literally just saw that for My Hero Academia Season 5, and it was a f***ing disaster.
I'm Acid Master Pinky!
And I'm Shogun. I'm Stun Gun Hero Charge.
Oh shit, the show can have good episodes. Madoka Magica, however, felt like it was all planned out. The show knew the impactful moments it wanted to get to, but it didn't rush towards them. It just built towards them as efficiently as possible, while still providing ample time for us to grow attached to these characters, before Urobuchi kills them off in typical Urobuchi style. Oh yeah, this story is written by Gen Urobuchi. This absolute mad lad wrote Fate Zero, my second favourite anime of all time, second only to this masterpiece of a show, obviously. Going into the show knowing exactly who wrote it was the funniest shit ever. I love this man's writing so much, like so much, but he really does have a style, and it was so funny to notice some of these things.
Maybe there'll come a time when your back's gonna be up against the wall and you'll have to stand up and fight. If that day ever comes, you can think about it then.
When the day finally arrives that you find a way to live that you can truly be proud of, you will be forced into your own grand battle, one that you will have to fight whether you want to or not. You will have plenty of time then to look for your battlefield.
I sense similar themes. Madoka Magica is kind of like if a magical girl show had a child with Fate Zero. Seriously, everything is so similar, from the heavy ancient Greek tragedy elements all the way to the goddamn soundtrack. Oh yeah, these shows also share the same exact composer. It's awesome. Yuki Kajiura has got to be one of the most badass musicians to ever walk the earth, but I'm gonna be honest fellas, it really feels like she wrote both of these soundtracks at the same time. More of this, please. I just paired that scene with Fate Zero's Ost, and I bet you couldn't even tell the difference, even having watched both shows. Well, the lack of sound effects may have made it obvious, but you get the point. I wish every scene in anime could have a little bit of Kajiura's music sprinkled in there. Also, Calafina? Yes, please. Okay, I'm definitely getting copyright claim for that entire section, so let's just move on quickly, please. I personally feel the main reason why this show was so fun to rewatch is because it's a tragedy. This particular genre of storytelling lends itself to multiple rewatches, as in a tragedy, a character's choices and mistakes are what ultimately lead them to their inevitable downfall. A good tragedy will leave these choices and mistakes out in the open, but on a first watch through, you'll likely never expect for those choices to lead to that character's tragic end. Obviously, the best example of this is Sayaka, who meets her end in episode 8, but her end isn't actually brought about by one thing, but it's a series of choices she makes beforehand.
Even if you fight like that and win every battle, it's not good for you. Can't you see that?
Then what is good for me?
Watching through this show for a second time, you notice each and every bad choice, like when she refuses Homura's help because she doesn't trust her. On a first time watch through, the audience also doesn't have a reason to trust Homura, so they don't completely disagree with Sayaka's choice. But rewatching that same scene, knowing where these two characters end up, you find yourself pointing at the screen and saying, yep, that was a bad idea. It sort of just adds an extra bit of fun to the show, because it lets you appreciate just how well this story has been crafted and planned out. I found it's also pretty fun to act like Captain Hindsight, making fun of characters for not knowing things you already know. Like when Madoka throws Sayaka's soul gem off the bridge, she doesn't really think about the consequences of doing that, because, you know, she wouldn't expect there to be any. But on rewatch, I just remember sitting there going like, Madoka, why would you do that? No, like, seriously, like, what do you have to gain from that? Like, yeah, you don't know what will happen, but why would you take the risk? What's your plan? What's your plan? Suffice to say, rewatching a show is a completely different experience to watching one for the first time, and I don't think you have to be a genius to guess that. But of course, I've talked a lot about the act of rewatching Madoka Magica, and I think at this point that I've made it pretty clear that I found this show to be a very interesting one to re-experience. But I also want this video to double as a review of the show in general, so I'm going to try my very best to sum up a lot of things that I particularly really like about this show in about 800 words or less. Personally for me, one of the best things about this show is how it uses 2D animation to portray emotion. The things this show does with its animation is more akin to something out of a Disney movie rather than what you would typically find in an anime. Perhaps the best example of this is the witches, who are animated in such a way that they look more like papier-mâché puppets than the usual hand-drawn animation of our characters, and obviously these sequences speak for themselves. The two drastically different art styles clashing with each other really helps to sell the idea of these dangerous, otherworldly entities inflicting their malice on the world around them. It often gives the witches this eldritch, Lovecraftian feel, and on a stylistic and technical level, it's a really great design and animation choice. When talking about this, two other sequences come to the forefront of my mind as moments that really stood out to me. The first is Sayaka's emotional breakdown during her confrontation with one of the witches. It's here where we first see Sayaka crack after realizing that her choice to become a magical girl has cost her not only a normal life, but the very chance at romance she initially had wished for. This whole sequence is told to us with nothing but simplistic black and white silhouettes. Sayaka's sadistic laughter fills our ears as she brutally cuts up the flailing body of a witch. Her black painted silhouette prevents us from seeing her humanity, and it instead shows her as this thing, this monster utterly consumed with rage, resentment, and bloodlust. This moment is haunting, and it's one of my favourite scenes in the show. This other scene, in my opinion, pretty much speaks for itself.
Madoka.
The sheer absurdity and creativity of this sequence is honestly nothing short of incredible. The confusion, the gruesome imagery, much to the stress of Homura herself, shows us exactly what becoming a witch really means. All at once, your negative emotions become too out of control to suppress, and they torment you in an endless, jumbled, confusing mess. Both of these scenes are just I mean, they're great. Strigas portrays surrendering your humanity and giving into the rage and the hate that comes with experiencing misfortune. Homura's sequence, on the other hand, gives us a fantastically creative interpretation of depression and despair. While we're still more or less on the topic of animation, Madoka Magica is not devoid of really great action sequences either. The movie in particular contains probably one of my favourite fights in all of anime. Homura vs Mami combines a kick-ass waifu fight with amazing dance-like choreography, time-altering shenanigans, and a well-structured and quick back-and-forth flow. This show has hype fights, fights that keep you on the edge of your seat, fights that end in tragedy, and fights where you don't even know who to root for. Okay, so you guys probably know me too well at this point, so I've no doubt you saw this coming. Yes, I'm going to talk about waifus, or namely one waifu in particular. Homura has a very particularly special place in my heart, considering that she was my first proper waifu. I say proper because technically Mikasa was, but I don't count her anymore, as since then I've woken up and realized that she's not only a bad waifu, but just a poorly written character in general. Homura, however, has withstood the test of time, and especially after this recent rewatch, she has cemented herself for me as one of the most kick-ass waifus in anime. Fueled by nothing but a strong desire to make the one she loves happy, Homura adopts a cold and unfriendly persona, keeping her distance from Madoka so that she can protect her in secret. She's reset the timeline so many times that she's become this battle-hardened, calloused, and no bullshit kind of person who will sacrifice anything and anyone for the sake of Madoka's happiness. The show plays off this fact, having her seem almost like the villain at first. From an outside perspective, all of her actions seem selfishly motivated, but it's not until the final act of the show that you get a whole new perspective, and she practically becomes the real protagonist of the story. This isn't Madoka's story. It never was. Homura is the primary reason why rewatching this show is so enjoyable. Not just because she's a kick-ass waifu of time powers, although that's certainly part of it, but because she's a character whose actions take an entirely different meaning once you know her full story. Everything she does, from the way she presents herself to others, to the advice she gives to Madoka, all the way to her resentment towards magical girls and the system that creates them, everything suddenly makes sense. And honestly, that's why I love rewatching any great show, because only after knowing a character's hidden feelings and motivations, what their present actions will lead to, and what their future actions will be, only then can we fully appreciate the character writing in shows like this. I mean, why else would I watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood 11 times? Anyways, I think that's enough from me for this month. For now, I shall return to cryostasis, before inevitably waking up from my long slumber to bring you another video next month. Thank you for joining me on this short exploration into why rewatching shows is something you should definitely do from time to time. Thank you for hearing me rant about an anime that many of you have probably forgotten. And thank you all for simply being epic. Right, what do you want, a medal? Clear off! Got Dark Souls videos to edit. Okay, but... oh, that voice break! God damn!